Greetings, Com 600. This is Ben Frazier, one of your professors in this class, along with Dr. Jim Ward. We're going to be taking an adventure with you this semester. I'm sorry I didn't get a video out last week. I wasn't feeling good, and then we had a snow day off, and we had some problems with Blackboard. So a bunch of things just got us off to a rough start. But now we're, I think, all on track. It looks like you're doing good and responding to the questions last week, and we want to just want to introduce myself and introduce the topic for you this week, and just to say hi and how much we appreciate you joining us in this class. This class, Com 600, Story, Popular Culture, and Worldview. First, a little bit about overview of the class. What are we trying to do? Well, one of the basic things we believe in communication is that man is homo narrative. That means he's a human storyteller. Whatever else man may be, he ends up telling stories. We tell stories in everything we do, whether it's selling a car, whether it's writing an article for a class or for a journal, whether it's buying something. Somebody will say, tell me about this product here, and then they tell you. Selling insurance, but all the kinds of things we do, we end up telling stories. You go to a church and the minister tells you stories. So we tell stories to one another in conversations over dinner. We are storytellers. Now, not all narrative, not all communication is a story, but given time, almost all of us, when we want to tell something in a more complete way, we tell it through story. So man is that intrinsic, that natural part within him or her to tell a story. So that's the very foundation of this class, that we are storytellers, and we're going to learn how to talk, how to speak, how to communicate truth, how to tell better stories and communicate better. Second part is popular culture, and that's just the fact that we are connected with other people. We are made to be in relationship, and that's why we're storytellers. And so that storytelling creates culture, and culture creates alliances, they create relationships, and those relationships are forged or separated in part by the stories we tell and how we communicate and how we maintain these communities of understanding and of thought. And so popular culture, of course, is dominated today not so much by just the family, as is one of the elements, but also by the media and the technology. And there are so many forms of storytelling and of communication that are happening through not only the big media like television and radio and films and that, but the internet and the social media and all these different forms of communication that influence and invade our life. They're just part of the soup that we're all swimming in. And that's a big part of our culture. And so we want to see how that is affecting us and the stories we're getting through there. A lot of times these stories happen at more subtle levels and influence us in those ways. Okay, so a third area then is worldview. And what do we mean by worldview? And some of you were talking about it and doing a very good job. It's a very messy term, admittedly, but it sort of is the assumptions that we bring to how we move, how we behave, how we think in our world. There is no one worldview that everybody shares. And we come to know our worldview by examining our own life and examining our culture and begin to think, what are those things that influence us? And so one of the attempts that I'm going to do in this class is to help each of us begin to think through, what are those things that cause me to think this way and cause me to believe this way? Our worldview is shaped a lot by the time and history, time and place that we're raised in, that we think in, that we experience. That's how we come to know, through the language of our community and our family, through the behaviors and rituals that and by behaviors and rituals, I don't just mean things in church. I mean things in the family. Every family has their own way of having dinner, of teaching people how to answer the phone, of behaving in relationships that are forged. So there's those rituals that our families has. Institutions have rituals. The way you work, the stories that energize a community are part of those rituals and those stories that shape our lives and in many ways shape the communities and the organizations for which we work or are in. So we have those kinds of things. So we want to begin to explore those things, to see how they affect our lives, how they empower our living. One of the things that we're studying this week, of course, is the Lewis and the Freud. And those are two of the major themes in worldview that you'll find in our culture again and again. Many people consider themselves Christian, and there's, of course, not just one definition of that. There are many definitions of what it means to be a Christian, some more accurate than others, and in the same sort of way as the scientific worldview. And we want to look at that, and what does that scientific worldview look like? What is it privileges, the scientific worldview privileges reason. It privileges that sort of way of knowing and of proof. And of course, a worldview cannot be proven. There are evidence for worldviews, and there's sometimes good evidence for it, but ultimately a worldview cannot be proven. Why? Because the very basis of a worldview, you take a stance towards things like what man really is, what God really is. Are there spiritual dimensions to man? That doesn't come through in most scientific proof, because scientific proof is based on empiricism, things you can touch, taste, smell, see, hear, those kinds of the five senses. And so when you want to talk about God, or you want to talk about heaven, or you want to talk about those kinds of things, is there life after death, and those kinds of things that Nikolai talks about, you can't actually prove them in the scientific sense of that word that is used today. So we have to be very careful how we use our words and what we say we are trying to do when we look at the different kinds of worldview. All worldview, it seems to me, starts with some kind of faith commitment. We have faith in that there is a God, for instance, or faith that a Christ was the Son of God. Christ was in fact fully God and fully man. Very difficult. It's a paradox to try to understand that from a reason standpoint. So that's a faith commitment that we make. Now, what part does reason play? It plays a good part, because once we come with those faith commitments, and everyone has them, whether they're science or whether they're Christian, everyone has them, then you make some kind of good logic and reason and thought. What is included in reason is also things like beauty, things like goodness. You can't divorce reason from ethics. You can't divorce reason from the idea of the beauty of the way things are in this world. And so it's a different kind of reasoning that we're talking about. Nevertheless, it involves good, clear thinking. It also involves good ways of telling and speaking and explaining. And oftentimes we'll find that the most persuasive and powerful ways of knowing is through story, telling good, powerful stories. Why? Because story engages not only the mind, but the heart, and the will. And part of man and part of who we are willing, feeling beings as well as thinking beings. And so this class is based on some of those ideas, that we're going to look at the power of story to influence our culture and how we think about this world and perhaps the extensions of that world into the next and to God, and then how to discuss and how to communicate our ideas in the most powerful and clear way. Now, I've been reading some of your discussion online, and I think it's a very good beginning. I want to encourage you in a couple of areas. One, and I think Dr. Ward talked about this, is that we really need to reference scholarly material. And by scholarly material, we mean journal articles that are refereed and that have footnotes and reference their ideas. And you need to reference your ideas. we're not really interested in opinion. Opinions are cheap. Everybody has an opinion. But what you need is good reason and evidence, and you bring to bear references that other people have supported, and we can go and explore where those ideas came from. And so let me encourage you to, of course, what's that mean? Just don't Google something and find it on the internet and say, oh, that's a good idea. It may be a good idea. I'm not saying it's not. But scholars have to be a little more careful than that. Scholars have to go to references so that people can explore and examine where they got their ideas and what those ideas really rest on. So let me encourage you to go to good books that scholars have written and go to referee journals and not just share opinions, but share good reasons. Whether you like something or not doesn't really matter. You can like certain kinds of colors or not. You can like certain kinds of things or not. But what you really want to do is say why those things are important. And that why is much more important. So let me encourage you to do that. We're off to a good start. We're reading the last half of Nikolai this week. I hope you're enjoying this book. You need to begin to start next week. You're going to have your first book review. And next week's book is an excellent book by Quentin Schultz, a friend of ours and here at the university, and a very strong writer. And so I encourage you to get a good start on that book for next week, because there's a book review due next week. All right, God bless you. Hope you're having a good week, and we'll see you online. Bye-bye.